probably the best stand-up in the racket.
He's funny. Did I say that twice? Oh, good. Well, he is.
Here he is. Personal favorite among this guy, among the new comedians, is young and gifted.
Very much. You look great. That's all we need, another bright new young comedian.
Good friend of mine, a wonderful comedian.
Please welcome my old buddy,
Tom Dreesen.
Tom Dreesen.
Tom Dreesen.
Tom Dreesen.
Here he is, Mr. Tom Dreesen.
Tom Dreesen.
And to this day, people say, "Who's Tom Dreesen?" It was a great start.
We are back with Who's Tom Dreesen. I am Joe Goal, and this is, of course,
Who's Tom Dreesen?
Who's Tom Dreesen? And we're still trying to figure that out, but I think we got a little more closer to that on last episodes. So last we finished with Tim and Tom. A little bit of self-talk that I want to get into. You know, as an actor, first of all, I can't tell you how many people, when I was moving out here 3 years ago, I cannot tell you how many people said either, oh, you're going to move back, or how bad California is, whether it be the politics, the traffic, or, oh my gosh, acting's so hard and it's so flooded. What? Did that ever happen to you, first of all?
Of course, it happens with people who don't want you to leave the neighborhood.
Right.
Because they didn't have the courage to leave the neighborhood themselves.
Sure, yeah. And I just, me being me, I was just like, block them out or whatever. And then I really came out here and I realized that it is a difficult, again, like I said last episode, I had to bartend for a year and a half when I came out here. What did you tell yourself, especially in comedy when coming up, that made you positive and made you keep going?
There's so many things.
Yeah.
All the books that I read that I mentioned earlier, The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by
Sure.
Joseph Murphy, The Power of Positive Thinking, Norman Vincent Peale. All those books helped me a great deal. But there was one book particularly that I called out that I read years ago. It's What to Say When You Talk to Yourself by a guy named Shad Helmstetter.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, the most important person you'll ever talk to is yourself.
Sure, yeah.
That's the most important person you'll ever talk to is yourself. And to digress a minute, that those people that try to, rain on your parade.
Yeah.
Joey, you'll be back soon, or that'll never work out. You know. Remember this, and I think it was Mark Twain who said it, that successful people, stay away from negative people.
Mm-hmm.
What do they call it? Successful people want you too to become successful. Small people will belittle your ambitions,
Right.
but successful people want you also to become successful.
Right.
So there's a lot of people that aren't going to, and again, I'll digress again.
Right.
Pythagoras, who was a great mathematician but also a philosopher, said, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said, life is like the Olympic Games. He said, there are those who choose to get in the arena and go for the gold. There are others who choose to sit in the arena and watch those go for the gold. And then there are those who choose to sell trinkets to those who are watching those go for the gold.
Interesting.
And I always say, my ex-wife did not want to get in the arena and go for the gold.
Yeah.
And she didn't want to sell them damn trinkets either.
No, right. She just wanted to watch everybody else do it.
But by the way, it's okay. She was perfectly.
Yeah.
She wanted to sit and watch you go for the gold.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people that want that. There are other people that want to be like me. I want to get in the arena and go for the gold.
Of course,
as,
yeah.
As
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with any of those three.
No,
It
right.
was just,
Right.
So but the book that helped me What to Say When You Talk to Yourself, is again by Shad Helmstetter. There were times that, you say things to yourself, oh, that's not going to work, or this is going to work, or how could I ever amount to anything? And your subconscious mind, again, doesn't know the difference between the truth or fiction. It only knows what you program into it, with images especially.
Sure.
Whatever the mind can see and believe, it will achieve.
Right.
Written thousands of years ago. I think it's biblical in nature.
Yeah.
But that goes back to The Power of Your Subconscious Mind book.
Right.
I'm getting off the subject here.
Yeah.
But the self-talk book was, so I started thinking, I've got to start saying positive things to myself.
Yeah.
So I wrote on 3x5 cards, 7, a Monday, a Tuesday, a Wednesday, a Thursday, a Friday, a chant or a mantra.
Right.
Like I would, and that whole day, on that Monday, I would have that. I would say it wherever I was at, in the car, walking, jogging, working out, whatever I was doing. If I'd get a negative thought, I'd change it to the positive thought.
Sure.
Remember, my mind is constantly in tune with the positive. It is bright cheerful, enthusiastic, and full of good, positive thoughts and ideas. I would say that all day long. Whenever a negative thought, I say, oh, my mind is constantly in tune with the positive. Day by day, in every way, I'm getting better and better.
I like that one.
Day by day, in every way, I'm getting better and better.
Yeah.
If I didn't feel good, if I was ill, if I was worried about my acting or my stand-up comedy, when I would think it's some negative, I said, no, day by day, in every way, I'm getting better and better.
Yeah.
And that was something you keep saying. You're talking to yourself. Sure. The most important person you'll ever talk to is yourself.
Yeah. And I think you taught me really well. I don't know why it stuck with me so much of you just saying cancel, cancel. We were doing a gig. Well, I wasn't doing a gig, but you were doing a show at the old Jewish home in
Ron Greenberg in Culver City.
In Culver City, right. And I was on a veil or hold for, a commercial, a film, a TV show, and I got released from all of them within a matter of like 20 minutes. And I went up to you and I said, I just got released from this and this and this, rejection, rejection, rejection. And you said, that 3 rejections, you're going to get 20 rejections. And I kept saying to myself out loud, cancel, cancel, cancel. And the old folks were looking at me like I was crazy. Cancel? What the hell does that mean? But I think that really stuck with me. And
well, explain what I'm saying. When a negative thought comes in your mind, it's like if you like a computer, you put cancel, cancel, delete, delete, delete.
Right.
A negative thought comes in your mind, and you keep dwelling on it. You're giving power to it.
Right.
Negative thoughts are dirt. You've seen me do this in motivation classes.
Right.
I would take a glass of water and I'd pour dirt in it and I'd stir it up and I'd say to the class, "Somebody drink this. Someone drink this." I'm not going to drink that. If you won't ingest filth in this part of your body, why would you ingest filth in this part of your body?
Right.
Negative thoughts are dirt.
Right.
So if you were planting a garden and flowers, now positive thoughts are flowers, aren't they?
Right.
So if you're going to plant flowers and you do, and weeds grow, would you allow the weeds to grow? No, you dig up the weeds and replant flowers.
Right.
Negative thoughts are weeds.
Right.
So whenever a negative thought would come in my mind, and I'd start dwelling on it, and I'd start getting the feeling like, I go, whoa. Cancel, 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 delete, delete, delete. Replace that with a positive thought. Yeah. I feel happy, I feel healthy, I feel terrific. I feel happy, I feel healthy, I feel terrific. Yeah. I can accomplish all things. Those kind of things. That you start saying positive things yourself. Again, this is a universe that you've been given. And I'm going to get the way I feel. Mm-hmm. I feel God created this incredible universe. That's what I feel, I believe. Mm-hmm. And I believe that he created this universe.
Right.
This is the universe you're going to go through life in. Okay? You're in charge of that universe.
Right.
So you can you watch what you eat, you watch what you put in your mouth, you watch what you put in your head.
Sure.
This is your universe. Now, your universe, it's like you're like a spaceship traveling through time and space. It needs to know where you want it to go.
Right.
A lot of people, the pilot who flies the 747 every day, drives to the airport, say he's going from Boston to L.A. He doesn't drive 100 miles an hour, drive out onto the tarmac, slam on the brakes, car goes sideways, run aboard the aircraft, take off down the runway and say, now where am I going?
All right.
He files a flight plan.
Right.
He files a flight plan.
Mm-hmm.
You can file a flight plan.
Right.
And again, the most important person you'll ever talk to is yourself.
Right.
Every time you get a negative thought, replace it with a positive thought.
Right.
If you think you're going to be a failure, cancel, and see it, replace it with a positive thought. Now your subconscious mind, eventually, whatever it is you want to do, if you wanted to be a comedian, you would see yourself on that stage scoring, doing real well. And now your subconscious mind says, now I know where you want me to go. Mm-hmm. Now you just filed a flight plan.
Yeah.
Where you want to go.
Yeah.
I'll tell you this, when I was sleeping in the car out here in L.A., when the comedy team split up, and I ended up sleeping in an old abandoned car, a Nash Rambler. Mm-hmm. The front seat came down. I would hitchhike every night up and down Sunset Boulevard to the Comedy Store, begging to work for free at the Comedy Store. I couldn't even get onto the Comedy Store. And I was rejected day after day after day.
Yeah, rejection.
And one day I went back to the car late at night, and I lay there, and I thought, you know what? I know now what I want to do. I want to get on the Johnny Carson show. In those days, wherever you went in America, people say, what is it you do? You say, I'm a stand-up comedian. The next question out of their mouth was, oh, yeah? Have you ever been on Johnny Carson? If you had been on Johnny Carson, in the eyes of America, you weren't a comedian.
Yeah.
And one appearance on that Tonight Show, Freddie Prinze got a sitcom the next day. I did one appearance later on. CBS signed me to a development deal. I was in the unemployment line with a wife and 3 kids later on. And one appearance on the Tonight Show, my whole life changed. So what I would do when I would go to sleep at night, I would envision Johnny Carson talking to me saying, "You're a funny guy, Tom Dreesen."
Sure, yeah.
Because in those days, you had to do stand-up comedy, and Johnny didn't call you over to sit by him on the first appearance, usually like on the third appearance.
Right.
You want to make sure you had legs.
Right.
So, and to America, you did the Tonight Show, you had arrived. To my industry, you had not arrived unless Johnny sat and talked to you.
Right.
So I would lay in that car when I couldn't get on at the Comedy Store, and
Yeah.
I'd see Johnny Carson saying, "You're a funny guy, Tom Dreesen. You're a funny guy."
Yeah.
Knowing if I was sitting by him, I'd already succeeded over there.
Yeah.
I did 61 appearances on the Tonight Show, as you pointed out earlier. And whenever I give motivation talks, I hold up that picture of Johnny Carson laughing at me.
Yeah.
And I say, "This is the picture I imaged in my mind when I was sleeping in the abandoned car."
Right.
Nothing can become a reality unless it's thought first.
Yeah.
Everything you see here, this book, this trophy, this here, these were all thoughts, this microphone,
Right.
before they became realities.
Right.
The same thing applies to your life.
Yeah, I think following that flight plan, it goes along with, when you were coming up, there was a specific plan. It went right from we'll get to this, but the Comedy Store, Johnny Carson, and then whatever you did after that. But I think for acting and people nowadays, I think I don't know if it's you trying to figure out yourself or like you said, taking risks last episode. So I don't know what it is nowadays.
There was a stairway to stardom as a stand-up comedian when I started out. It was the Johnny Carson Show. Today the comedians on social media, they can get 10 or 15 million people maybe watching them one night on social media if they come up with something clever.
Right.
That's more than any TV show today.
Right.
Way more than any TV show today.
Right. Well, yeah, but so I want to go back to the Tim and Tom thing now. So you and Tim decided to have a comedy team, and then you got a few gigs, bombed the first gig that you said, right? And then when did it really start to develop into something that you're like, okay, this could be?
When we worked at Chitlin Circuit, all black,
black.
The Sugar Shack in Boston, the 20 Grand in Detroit. That was when Motown was in Detroit. All the Motown acts would go to this club called the 20 Grand and break in their show there before they went to Vegas. A gangster owned it, a guy named Bill K. Bush, BK. And then also in Chicago, the High Chaparral, the Burning Spear, the Guys and Gals Lounge, the Cotton Club. In Atlantic City before they had gambling, the Club Harlem. All these, what they call the Chitlin Circuit, black-owned, black-operated nightclubs. Tim and I started getting our legs. We started getting our timing down and timing. But then later we went on the Playboy Circuit. On the Playboy Circuit, you did like 4 or 5 shows a night. There were 17 Playboy clubs in America and 2 resorts, Great Gorge and Lake Geneva. When you worked, you went Baltimore, Chicago, New York, Boston, Philadelphia, Miami, Los Angeles. You did 4 or 5 shows 5 times, and you'd go to the Playroom, do a show. You come down, you go up to the Penthouse, then the Playroom, the Penthouse. Our timing became like incredible.
Right.
In fact, we went to Mr. Kelly's later, performing in Chicago. Mr. Kelly's, which is now Gibson Steakhouse.
Right.
But it was Mr. Kelly's. It was when you arrived at Mr. Kelly's, you made the big time in Chicago. All the press would come to that. One of the press guys, Sam Lessner from the Chicago Daily News, said to watch Tim and Tom perform is like watching a master ping pong match.
Wow.
But because we got our timing down on the Playboy Circuit.
I think timing is a lot of things too. Just like in acting, and I tell everybody that comes to the self-tape studio, a script is it's a piece of music, pretty much. It's like we're throwing a ball back and forth right here. I think a lot of it has to do with timing, especially in acting and comedy. So as you're going through these gigs, I don't want to ask like what's the craziest thing that ever happened to you, but what were some of the things that are surreal that still stand out to you to this day?
Well, again, we were America's first black and white comedy team. America wasn't ready for us. We were ready for America, but the majority of America wasn't ready for us, because in those days you didn't see a black guy and a white guy walking down the street together, let alone on a stage together. It was 1969, and that you got to think at that time, the Vietnam War was going on. Students were protesting all over. African Americans were rioting in all the major cities in America. America was in turmoil.
Right.
And then here you go into a club, and in those days, by the way, even though the Civil Rights Act was passed in 1964. Martin Luther King was assassinated. Bobby Kennedy was assassinated. America was in turmoil. So you'd go into a club. Even though it was integrated America, blacks weren't going to white clubs and whites weren't going to black clubs in those days. So when we go in front of an audience, they'd, whoa, what is this? Sometimes we'd be in a rowdy, noisy audience, and then, ladies and gentlemen, comedy team, and sometimes people would be doing something. They'd look up, and you'd hear a hush go over the room.
Right.
What is this all about?
Right.
A black guy and a white guy on stage together,
I mean, you guys worked all black clubs, so it had to have been, what's this white boy doing with, right, Tim Reid?
Yeah, and vice versa. With Tim, when we worked in our white club, they said, what's this black guy doing with this white boy?
Yeah.
The first club we ever worked was the Golden Horseshoe. The first club that ever paid us was the Golden Horseshoe in Chicago Heights, Illinois.
Huh.
And one night, a guy put a lit cigarette out in Tim's face.
Really?
Yeah, and then he tried to beat the bejesus out of me. And as I told you I boxed when I was in the Navy, but this guy outweighed me by 100 pounds.
Yeah.
And it was a Donnybrook, a real brawl,
Huh.
A friend of mine asked me one time, what's a Donnybrook? I said,
I was going to say, what is it, Donnybrook?
Oh, it's an Irish expression. You ever see when in baseball when both benches empty and they go running on the field? That's called a Donnybrook.
Why is it called it?
It was an old Irish custom when there was a big brawl in the streets, when there was more than two guys fighting.
Right.
When the whole thing broke into a fight, that's called a Donnybrook.
Yeah. So it seems like when you tended bar, you fought. In the Navy, you fought. And then while you were in a comedy team, you fought people, it seems like. Are you sure you're not a boxer in your best life?
It didn't happen often. But in that particular night, it was a brawl.
Yeah.
And a couple of my Italian buddies jumped over the bar. They were attending bar there, and they helped out with the brawl. But it was a real bad time.
Yeah.
And in fact, we got in the car that night. We were both bruised up, and Tim looked at me and he said, "Welcome to show business."
Welcome to show business.
Our fourth time on stage. But in those days, interesting, racism in those days, if there was a black guy who hated white people, hated them with a passion, he wasn't mad at me. He was mad at Tim for being with me.
Huh.
If there was a redneck, a white guy who hated black people with a passion, he wasn't mad at Tim. He was mad at me for being with Tim.
Yeah.
It was a strange dynamic there. And we had some skirmishes, but for the most part, people, liked what we did. We had a lot of funny routines.
Right.
We had when we'd go to work, we did 11 prisons in 1 year.
Yeah.
And we did the county jail. Every prison we'd go to, I would get all the information from all the inmates and stuff that I could about where all the white guys in the prison. They'd say, well, that'd be C block or something. They'd say, where are all the black guys? They're in D block. And then where are all the gay guys? And they said all the gay guys worked in the laundry. So we did a thing on The Dating Game. If you ever remember that TV show, The Dating Game, where I became the girl with a wig on, and Tim was the three bachelors, and had great acting skills. Tim, that's why he went on to become a good actor. Tim would become bachelor number one, was a white guy from the Hicks from the country, and he was from C Block, and we'd name his name, some stupid name, and all the guys from C Block would cheer,
Yeah, right.
And from D Block, and all the black guys would cheer. That's your number two, and then from the laundry, and then of course the whole place would erupt in laughter. And it was a third guy, it was a gay guy. What's he doing on Dating Game? And the gay guys loved the bit. The gay guys, they would always come to us afterwards and say, that is so funny. Well, because what happened was bachelor number three was a gay guy. He was more interested in bachelor number two than he was with the woman. So all of our questions were about the prison and asking him questions, and it was a big hit in all the prisons.
Yeah.
And that bit we did also in different cities. We would name the toughest part of town, and that sort of thing, and put these three characters in those situations.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the great bits that we did. We had another bit where Tim was teaching me how to be black.
Yeah.
And the audiences, we had a lot of real good routines.
Yeah.
Somebody said to me one time, Raymond Arroyo did an interview with me one time, a great interview. It's on YouTube, but he said to me about how did you and Tim, how did the team work? How come it was a success for that period of time? I said, because we really liked one another. We were really good friends.
Sure.
We're good friends to this day. Even after the team split up and broke my heart, we stayed good friends because we were good friends. We really liked one another, and we had good material.
Yeah. I was going to actually ask you, I mean, you guys were on the road probably so much, you became almost like brothers, right?
Oh. Not only that, we became like two guys in a foxhole. I remember when I was in that Marine Corps unit, when I served in the service, the DI said one time after a real tough week, hell week, he said, Dreesen, the rest of your life, you'll judge every man you meet by if the shit hit the fan, would I want him in a foxhole with me? And that's the way I've been that way my whole life. Whoever I meet somebody after a while, I think, if the shit hit the fan, would I want this guy with me?
Yeah.
There's a lot of guys that say, yeah, I want him. And there's a lot of guys say, I don't want him in the foxhole with me.
Right.
Well, Tim and I were like that. Tim and I had gone through a lot of combative situations and tough situations, you know, that we became bonded. That he knew I had his back, and I knew he had my back, and so that bond, you know, that showed on the stage
for sure. And now that you fought everybody else, did you and Tim ever fight?
Oh, we had
not box, but I mean, get into it a little bit.
You have creative arguments. Oh my God, we had.
Sure.
I mean, the comedy teams always, you know, but it was always creative. It had nothing to do with race.
Right.
I mean, we never argued really about race. We had some funny. I'll tell you a funny story. One time in Detroit, we were working in Detroit at the 20 Grand, and you know, I was saying to Tim, we're writing material. We're new at it, and so you know, we thought it was funny. And so once you get on a roll when you're writing, you know, you got like that spirit going and everything. You don't want to stop. Right. So we were on a roll there, and I said, oh, Tim, I got another idea. I said, if a white guy ever starts heckling you and saying something, I'll jump up and I'll say, hold it, buddy, leave him alone. He's mine. Go get your own. After all, you know how hard they are to train. And Tim goes, oh, Tom, that's kind of racist. I said, oh, Tim, I didn't. No, Tom, I know you're not a racist. You're my partner. Right. You're my partner. But he said, that is kind of racist. I said, well, I didn't. No, Tom, don't apologize. We're writing material here. Right. We got to keep flowing, keep the juices flowing. But that's kind of racist. I said, okay. You know, that night, I'm not making this up. That night in the late show at the 20 Grand in Detroit, there was like a private party, like a birthday party for 22 black guys in the room there. Yeah. The moment we walked on stage, and ladies and gentlemen, come Tim and Tom, a black guy in the back said, hey, white boy, what the hell are you doing in this neighborhood? And Tim said, hold it, brother, leave him alone. He's mine.
No, he did not.
Go get your own. After all, you know how hard they are to train. And the brothers were pounding the table. They were, oh, man. Tim said, you know, you're right. That was funny. I said,
that was funny.
So how come it wasn't funny when I wrote but context.
Yeah.
Context, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Was Tim good at writing jokes?
That was kind of like my forte.
Sure, yeah.
You know, yeah. Tim was really good at acting. You give Tim a script. And that's why he was such a good actor.
Sure, yeah.
You know, but he you know, we both were like funny together. But I'm pretty good at writing jokes.
Right.
I've you know, again, I've talked about it before. You know, how to write a joke. Comedy is 9-10 surprise. The audience laughs because they didn't think you're going to say that or do that.
Right.
So the setup line has to hide the punchline.
Right.
And the other rule is there are no victimless jokes. Who's the victim in a joke? Somebody's got to be wrong in this joke.
Yeah.
The government, the airlines, me, my daughter, she's dating a punk rocker. You know,
right.
All those kind of stories.
Did you ever teach a class on joke writing?
No. I didn't think there were ever classes like that.
Oh, yeah.
But I read books.
Yeah.
You know, there's a book called The Great Comedians that a guy named Larry Wilde, he also, he wrote The Great Comedians. And he later critiqued my act years later and gave me a wonderful review. But in it was a chapter on all those comedians of that era, and they all had some kind of advice. Yeah. And so I read about how you come about material.
Yeah.
There was a comedian that I really liked when I was growing up. There were two comedians that I liked a lot. Was Jack Benny and Richard Pryor, of course. Yeah. Because Pryor came from a neighborhood like I did. He came from Peoria, Illinois. I came from Harvey. And I grew up in a predominantly black area, and I hung with the brothers. I played basketball on an all-black basketball team. I played football on an all-black football team. And I do routines, you know, routines about that. But Jack Benny, I liked him because a person to me is an artist in any endeavor. When you make your work look one word, effortless.
Sure, yeah.
You know, Jack Benny made comedy look easy. Frank Sinatra made singing look easy.
Sure, yeah.
You will be my music. You will be my song. You say, I can do that. No, you can't. He just made it look like
He just made it look like it, right.
And Pryor was, you know, from the neighborhood. When I saw Richard Pryor's act, and I met him personally years later, and we became friends, that was like, I was like back in the old neighborhood again. Yeah. You know, he was a conversation, you know, that he was having with us, you know.
Yeah. Interesting. So after you guys did all this, the Chitlin circuit, Tim and Tom, and then obviously at one point it broke up, right?
Yeah.
When was that final... That's it.
Well, we wrote a book years ago called Tim and Tom, an American Comedy in Black and White, and we both have, it was in 2005, and we both have different reasons why it broke up, but it broke up because a woman broke the act up.
Something about a girl, huh?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that when Tim and I first started talking about being a comedy team, I didn't have any reference to show business except there was, in my neighborhood, was a black singing group called the Dells. And the lead singer was Marvin, who used to live across the street from me, and he was a dear friend. And all the Dells are friends of mine. But so when Tim and I thought we said we're going to become a comedy team, I said, let's go talk to Marvin from the Dells. And Tim said, you know the Dells? I said, oh, yeah. We went over to Marvin's house and told him we want to become a comedy team. And he said, oh, that's a great idea, a black-white comedy team. No one's ever done that before. And he was encouraging us. And finally, when we left his house, we were walking out, and Tim and I were almost at the car, and Marvin was on the stoop, and he said, you know they're going to try to break you up. And we turned around and said, what? He said, you know they're going to try to break you up. We said, who? He said, they. He said, there are going to people that are going to see you, and they're not going to like the fact that you two get along. He said, there'll be black people who won't like that, and there'll be white people who won't like that. So they're going to try to divide you. They'll come to you and say, hey, white boy, you don't need that black dude. You can do this on your own. Or to the brother, hey, brother, you don't need that white boy. He said, watch out for that. He said, it's a game people play called divide and conquer.
Wow.
And so Tim and I got in the car and said, that'll never happen to us. But
okay, yeah.
years later, a woman, a singer that Tim and I opened for, and she later, she started making a move on Tim, and Tim actually left his wife and went to move out in Bel Air, left Chicago, and he's lived up in Bel Air, in this beautiful home, and all that, and we ended up getting a divorce and all that, and so that to me that broke up the act, you know.
And meanwhile, you're still in Chicago, right? You're still in.
I'm in Chicago, and I'm down. I never had been on stage alone, and now I've been with a comedy team 6 years. What am I going to do?
You're back in Harvey?
I'm back in Harvey.
You're back in Harvey
I'm
again?
back in Harvey, and I'm struggling. And so one night I'm sitting in a bar with my friends, and where I used to tend bar.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, what am I going to do? And I was always good at alternatives, and I thought, what am I going to do? My back is against the wall. But I said I could either do one of three things. I said I could either, quit and get a job in a factory, and my ex-wife would have loved that because she hated show business. She wanted me out of show business, and I don't blame her. But or I could find another black guy and do the same act, or I could go it alone and become a stand-up. And I thought, yeah, I'm sitting at the bar and I had 2 beers in front of me, and I'm thinking, yeah, I could go it alone. I started thinking, and I started thinking, I could go it alone. I could become a stand-up. And then I think, I want to get on the Johnny Carson show. That's where everybody was trying to get to, the Johnny Carson show. I started envisioning I could do that. And I remember a book I read by I think it was Clement Stone. He said, if you know what it is you want to do in life, and if it's a noble endeavor, then search your life and see if there's anything in your life that can deter you from that noble achievement and get it out of your life.
Yeah.
And I thought, what could stop me if I wanted to make it as a stand-up comedian? And I said, alcohol. I love to drink. I love to drink beer. I only was a beer drinker, but I love to hang out with the guys and drink a lot of beer. And I thought, alcohol. And I pushed the beers, 2 beers. Guys were buying, it was, closing time.
Right.
They're getting buying. And I pushed the beers across the bar. My buddy came up to me and he said, you through, Tommy? I said, I quit. He said, you through for the night, huh? I said, no, I'm through forever. I quit. He went, yeah, I'll see you tomorrow, Tommy. Yeah, right. And I never touched a drop from that time on. I concentrated on my career. I concentrated on material. And I struggled. I went through a lot of hardships. But I finally, got to the Tonight Show, and I scored, and the rest is history.
But obviously, you didn't go right from Harvey and then to the Tonight Show, right?
Oh no, I ended up going on the West Coast, and I told my wife, Tim Reid and I had one more gig to do, and that was in Houston, Texas, and then I was going to fly home. But I told my wife, I got to stop in L.A. I'm going to see about getting a job and blah blah blah, and she thought, finally he's going to quit show business and come back and get a job. Right. But I came out to the West Coast because that's where. Again, I pointed out earlier, everywhere you went in America in 1975, people say, what do you do for a living? You say, I'm a stand-up comedian. They said, wow, have you ever been on Johnny Carson? So if you're on Johnny Carson, you made it in America. So how do you get on Johnny Carson? I'm a businessman now. I'm in show business. I'm thinking, how do I get on Johnny Carson? I watched the comedians. They had the right material. They can make grandma and grandpa, mom and dad, and the kids laugh. And I also found out that the talent coordinators from the Tonight Show would go to the Comedy Store and look to find the new young comedians. So I had to get on at the Comedy Store, and that's what got me here.
Huh. So how did you? So how did you even get? First of all, on into the Comedy Store.
Well, I would go there, you have to sign up and try to get on Monday nights and all that stuff. It took me almost like a month to get on at the Comedy Store. And the woman that owned the place, Mitzi Shore, finally was going to watch you. Now, if Mitzi didn't like you, it's over.
That's it.
Because there weren't any comedy clubs in L.A. but one, the Comedy Store. The
Right.
Improvisation wasn't here. The Laugh Factory wasn't here.
Right.
It was the only comedy club. It was on Sunset Boulevard, and it was dynamic. Comedy was like the rock and roll of the 70s.
Sure.
Coordinators were coming there every night. The shows that were using comedians, Johnny Carson, Merv Griffin, Mike Douglas, Dinah Shore, Midnight Special, Rock Concert, Soul Train, American Bandstand. And also sitcoms are looking for comedians to be on sitcoms. So this was the place, the Comedy Store. And if Mitzi Shore likes you, she puts you on a regular schedule, you could work on your material and get seen by these shows.
Yeah.
I had to do 5 minutes in front of her one night.
Yeah.
And got up on stage and I scored. I came off, she goes, well, you have stage presence and you have good material. I'll put you on the schedule, which would mean you'd go on like Tuesday night at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
Not prime time.
Right.
But I said to her, I used to MC in Chicago, a little comedy room that I started in Chicago called Le Pub. I could also MC. Well, that's true. We always could use an MC. Now, that gave me an opportunity to be on stage almost every night and do a joke or two and bring up an act.
To get those good hours, though, right?
But it got me where I could develop there, and eventually I ended up getting on prime time. And eventually I was the first comedian of my class to get on The Tonight Show. I was on stage every night in those days with brand new comedians. A guy named David Letterman, Jay Leno, Robin Williams, Gallagher, Michael Keaton. The girl waiting tables. The girl waiting tables was Deborah Winger. I mean, this is every night somebody got discovered at the Comedy Store.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how did you? So obviously the talent coordinators, they would come to the Comedy Store. Did they just randomly come like on a Wednesday night?
Well, they would do that sometimes. They would just randomly come.
Yeah.
But also, if you had a manager or an agent, they would lobby that talent coordinator from those shows.
Did you have either of those?
I didn't. At that time, I had no manager, no agent. I couldn't, I couldn't buy an agent. I couldn't walk by. William Morris wouldn't let me even walk by their place. That's how bad things were. But I did an interesting thing. The Comedy Store had a softball team, and I played a lot of sports growing up and everything. So, and so I was on the Comedy Store softball team, and I always played in the outfield in my baseball career. But this time I was playing third base because we had a couple good outfielders, and I didn't care where they put me.
Sure.
But we played against The Tonight Show.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, and now The Tonight Show, they had Craig Tennis, who was the guy who really put comedians on. There were 4 coordinators on The Tonight Show in 1975. Bob Dolce, Howard Papish, Paul Block, and Craig Tennis. And they were scouts for The Tonight Show.
Yeah.
But Craig Tennis was the guy that was bringing comedians on at that time. And he was a real sports nut. And anyhow, long story short, Paul Block, one of their coordinators, hits a double into the outfield, but he tried to stretch it to a triple. And Larry Beezer, who was center fielder, real good ball player, Larry, he threw a perfect one-hopper to me, hit Paul, slid right into my tag. He's out.
He's out.
And the umpire said, he's out. The umpire was a guy who smoked dope. They just got some guy on the sideline. And Craig Tennis was coaching third base. He started screaming, he was not out. He was not out. He was safe. He's screaming. And the umpire said, okay, he was safe. He was safe. So I walked away. Now, Gabe Kaplan was pitching for our comedy team. And Gabe started arguing with Craig Tennis. Now, Gabe was already, not only, he had a series called Welcome Back, Kotter, but he also was guest hosting The Tonight Show.
Oh, wow.
So he's yelling at Craig, and Craig's yelling at him.
Right.
And finally, Gabe came to me and said, Tommy, he was out by 3 feet. I said, Gabe, you're doing The Tonight Show. I'm trying to get on The Tonight Show. I don't give a damn if he was safe or out. But, I didn't.
Whatever Craig says, I go with.
I felt like that show Hogan's Show. I saw nothing. Anyhow, now, 2 weeks later, Gabe Kaplan said to me, Tom, you want to come to The Tonight Show? I'm hosting. You want to sit in the audience? I said, oh, yeah. So I go there, and I went there half an hour before, and I noticed, but I always kept a pen and a pencil and paper on me in case something funny would come up. We didn't have cell phones in those days.
Right.
Something funny would come up, I'd write it down.
Right.
But I'm sitting in the audience, and I'm watching before the show, and I see Craig Tennis and Paul Block down there by home base, what they call home base. Right. And I said, and I write this letter to them, and I give it to a page, and I said, take this to Mr. Tennis. Yeah. And it put, Dear Mr. Tennis, my name is Pop Williams, and I'm blind in one eye and can't hardly see out of the other eye, but I was 100 yards away, and I could tell that Paul Block was out by 10 feet. They get this note. I'm watching, and they get this note, and they're going, they're looking up in the audience, and they see me, and they both start laughing.
That's great.
And
Wow.
I connected with Craig Tennis.
Wow.
And then I called him a week later and said, Craig, normally they would never take your call.
Yeah.
Only if an agent or a manager called.
Right.
But I called, and they put me right through to Craig.
Right.
He goes, hey, Tom, how you doing?
What's up?
I
Right.
said, fine. I say, Craig, could I get you to come and see me? I'd like to see if I got an act good enough to be on the Tonight Show.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, Tom, we set up a date. I'll let you know when I'm coming there to look at other acts. And he called me about 2 weeks later. They were coming to see three comedy acts. A comedy team called Baum and Eston. This is at the Comedy Store.
Mm-hmm.
A new kid named Billy Crystal, and I don't know whatever happened to Billy Crystal. and me.
Right.
You know, and an interesting story. Out in front of the Comedy Store that night was a Tuesday. I was really worried that there wouldn't be a big crowd, and you always want a big crowd if you're going to audition because bigger laughs.
Right.
But Tuesday nights usually didn't have a big crowd. I pulled up to the Comedy Store, and there's like 100 people out in front. I went, wow,
This is it.
wow, this is it. But I get out of the car, I see Rollins and Jaffe were a major management firm. They managed Woody Allen. They later managed Billy Crystal.
Yeah.
Or they were managing Billy at the time. I'm sorry, and they managing David Letterman years later. All the big stars.
Sure,
I think even Robin Williams. I can't remember, but at that time they were. All of us knew who they were. Out in front, I see Carl Reiner. I see Mel Brooks. I see all these stars. I go, wow. And what I found out was the management firm brought all of them there to see Billy. So they kept them outside. They weren't going to bring them in during my show or Baum and Eston, which is good managerial sense. You're gonna bring all these people, and they don't represent Tom Dreesen.
Right.
So they kept them outside till Billy went on.
Yeah.
So I had to go out in front of like 20 people, and so did Baum and Eston.
Yeah.
But Craig Tennis stayed in the room. When I came off, he said, I like your material. I like what I saw. I want you to come to my office tomorrow morning.
Ooh.
I went to his office the next day. He said, I saw you do 20 minutes. Show me the 5 minutes you would do if I put you on the show. In front of his desk, I did blah, 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 blah. He said, take that joke out. Bring him another one. Blah, 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 blah. He said, okay, you're on next Tuesday.
Oh, just like that.
Just like that. I call the whole world. I'm on the Tonight Show. Anyhow, I got there. They put you in makeup. You go up to your dressing room. They bring you down to the green room. They came in. They said, we ran out of time. You got bumped. You have to come back next week. I come back next week. I get in makeup. I go to my dressing room, down to the green room. We ran out of time. 3 weeks in a row, they ran out of time. I finally, the fourth week I get there, I'm in makeup, and Fred Dakota, the producer, came in. He said, I got bad news for you. I said, what? He said, you're going on tonight. Like 20 million people watched that show.
20 million people?
The pressure was enormous. You're standing behind that curtain, and it's moments before you're going on.
Yeah.
And not only do all the talent coordinators watch that show, all the biggest buyers for that show, corporate buyers watch that show.
Yeah.
So they're always looking for new comedians. Sitcom producers watch that show.
Right.
And my mother had everybody back in Harvey, Illinois.
That's the
watch
biggest pressure, your mom and Harvey.
If I bomb, I can't go back home.
No, right. But before I want to hear if you bomb or kill, I think I know what you do, but where did you live at the time? Because you said you were hitchhiking, right?
Well, by that time, I went back to Harvey, and I got my wife and kids to come back out here with me.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, and we were living on Van Owen. We lived on Van Owen and Kessler, a little apartment,
Yeah.
Anyhow, and my rent was $225 a month, and I couldn't even make rent money. I couldn't even make rent money. And, so, anyhow, when that first show, when I walked through that curtain, and Johnny Carson said, we're back now, and I'm glad you're in such a good mood tonight. My next guest is making his first appearance on The Tonight Show. Was a great line. I'm glad you're in such a good mood tonight.
Sure.
He would never do that any other time but that first time.
He set you up pretty good then.
Welcome, Tom Dreesen. I walk out, and first joke got a laugh. Second joke got a laugh. Third joke, I hear Johnny Carson and Ed McMahon laughing behind me. I end up getting 8 applause. And now I was a hit. And I closed. I said, you've been a wonderful audience. Show business is a tough life. So if you like me, and you're Protestant, say a prayer. If you're Catholic, light a candle. If you're Jewish, somebody in your family owns a nightclub. Tell them about me. We appreciate it. Big laugh. I go back through the curtain. The telecorder, Kirk Tennis come around. He said, go back. I said, go back and sit by Johnny. Don't go sit by Johnny. Just go back out. So I walked back to Johnny called me back out for a second bow.
Wow.
And he goes like this,
wow.
He knew you had arrived. And I never have stopped working since that night.
No kidding.
Never have stopped working since that night. I've been a comedian now for 56 years.
Wow.
And I've never stopped working since that night.
Do you think that night was the biggest moment in your career? Or do you think
No question about it.
that was it, huh?
Well, because it launched me. See, again, that was the show to do.
Right.
After I did that show, I was doing Dinah Shore, Merv Griffin, Mike Douglas, Johnny Carson.
Right.
I was doing Hollywood Squares.
Right.
I was doing $20,000 Pyramid. I was doing game shows.
Yeah.
I was doing What's My Line. I was doing not What's My Line. Another show called Password.
Right.
I was doing all kinds of these game shows
Right.
and stand-up and variety shows.
Yeah.
And then Sammy Davis Jr. had a variety show
Yeah.
called Sammy and Company.
Huh.
And I appeared on that. He took me on the road.
Oh.
I did a routine about growing up in a black neighborhood and
Right.
and how I played basketball on an all-black basketball
Right.
team. And
Yeah.
Sammy loved
Uh,
the material. So he took me on the road for 3 years.
uh.
I was touring with him, still doing all these shows. That again, I never stopped working from that night.
I want to hear all about Sammy, but we're going to wrap things up a little bit. Don't forget to follow us, like, subscribe on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts. Tom, do you have anything for us before we get out of here?
Every now and then I write something down that
Yeah.
But sometimes people ask me, like, who are you or what are you all about? I am what I am. I'm Tom Dreesen, but I love making people laugh.
Yeah.
I love to hear the sound of laughter.
Yeah.
And I love making people laugh. And that's who I am. I'm happy when
Yeah.
I'm making you happy.
Yeah. Right. Cool. Great.